where the eternal wisdom of the Torah meets the heartbeat of today's world. I am Gadi Ephraim, and today we journey deep into the powerful and sobering Parashat Sh'lach in this sacred year of 5785. Parashat Sh'lach, meaning send, opens with a story that continues to shape Israel consciousness, the sending of the 12 Israelite spies into the land of Canaan. What was meant to be a mission of inspiration and preparation turned into a national crisis of faith. 10 spies returned with a negative report, spreading fear among the people. Only Yehoshua and Kalev stood firm in their emunah, their trust in HaShem's promise. The result of this slander against the land? A divine decree that the entire generation, except for the faithful two, would wander and perish in the wilderness over 40 years. This wasn't just a physical wandering, it was a spiritual exile from destiny caused by fear, doubt, and distorted vision. But the parasha doesn't end in despair. It continues with laws of sacrifices, reminding us that teshuvah, return, is always possible. It then records the troubling story of a man who desecrates Shabbat and concludes with a mitzvah that continues to adorn us to this day. Tzitzit, the ritual fringes. These fringes are a daily reminder to not follow after your heart and eyes. The very failure that doomed the generation of the spies. As we reflect on this portion, we ask, what kind of report are we bringing back from our own journeys? Do we see the world through the eyes of fear or through the lens of faith and promise? May we, like Yehoshua and Kalev, stand strong in trust and truth, ready to enter the promised land within us and around us. Thank you for joining me today on Voice of Torah. Until next time, may the light of the Torah guide your steps, and may the soul of Israel be strengthened through truth, unity, and purpose. Shalom from Beit Yisrael International.
Okay, let's unpack this. We're diving deep today into the story of the spies from the Torah portion, Sh'lach.
Right.
But this isn't just, a history lesson. We're looking at excerpts from Sh'lach, elevating the natural to the divine mission, drawing on Gadi Ephraim notes and Beit Yisrael International perspectives.
Mm-hmm.
So our mission here for this deep dive is really to get what these specific sources are revealing about this really key moment.
Yeah.
Viewing it not just as like a failure of nerve, but maybe as a profound spiritual teaching.
Exactly. A teaching that really speaks to, everyone's individual journey and also the bigger collective purpose.
Transforming our relationship with the world, maybe, and our own potential in it.
That's it. And what's really fascinating, I think, is how these particular sources just completely reframe the story we think we know.
How so?
Well, they take the spy story, and instead of just fear and disobedience, they pull out this deeper theological idea. And it's an idea that, frankly, it challenges our basic assumptions about where spirituality is found, how we connect with the divine,
Interesting. So where do they start with that?
It really begins, according to these teachings, with the journey itself.
Yeah.
From the desert into the land of Israel.
Okay. The desert. Right. That was the place of open miracles, wasn't it? The manna, the cloud, the well.
Absolutely. A purely supernatural kind of existence, like a protected spiritual bubble.
Right.
And entering the land wasn't just about moving house or fighting battles. From this perspective, it was a fundamental divine command to shift gears completely.
Shift gears how?
The challenge was to take all that spiritual intensity they built up in the desert and apply it to the natural, physical, material world. The goal to transform that natural world itself through, active engagement, farming, business, building a society, but all infused with divine purpose, turning the everyday into something holy.
So the land wasn't meant to be just another place where miracles would keep happening, letting them stay in that bubble.
Precisely. That's not the model presented here. Think about thinkers like Rabbi Shneur Zalman of Liadi. His ideas are pretty foundational to this view.
Right.
He really emphasizes that Israel's unique mission is to bring holiness into the world, to reveal the divine spark that's hidden within creation through what we do, through mitzvot.
So it's not about escaping the physical to find God.
No, it's about making the physical world itself a dwelling place for God.
Okay. This really changes how we look at the spies' story then.
It does.
Their failure wasn't just, oh no, there are big guys over there.
Right.
It was, as these sources argue, a failure to see the land as this incredible, maybe even challenging opportunity for sanctification.
Yes, exactly. Their fear wasn't just physical, it was deeper. It reflected a spiritual misunderstanding, you could say, a fear of the huge responsibility that came with being agents of tikkun.
Tikkun, rectifying, elevating the sparks of creation.
Yeah, those sparks scattered in the material world. They thought, perhaps, that real spirituality could only happen where the supernatural was obvious, like it was back in the desert.
So they looked at the land, saw it was, natural with challenges, work, normalcy, and thought, this can't be the place for high-level divine service.
You got it. They missed the core idea that serving God, according to Torah, involves transforming the natural.
Give me an example.
Well, think about the Mishkan, the tabernacle in the desert. It wasn't a place to hide from the world. It was meant to bring heaven down to earth.
Right, built from physical stuff. Gold, wood, skins.
Exactly. Making a dwelling place for the divine within the physical realm. The spies, from this viewpoint, just didn't grasp that the land of Israel was meant to be the ultimate expansion of that very same principle.
Wow. That really reframes their fear. It's less, we can't win the fight, and more, we can't handle the job of making this place holy like God wants.
It's a profound shift in perspective from these teachings, isn't it?
It really is.
And this whole understanding of the mission, it gets tied in these sources to the bigger picture, the vision of Mashiach ben David and restoring the fallen sukkah of David.
Okay, hang on. How does the spies' story, this specific moment of failure, connect all the way to Mashiach and this idea of a sukkah? That feels like a leap.
Well, it's connected through that central theme, transformation.
Okay.
Just like the spies didn't recognize the land as the place for this deep divine service, Israel's whole journey towards redemption, towards the time of Mashiach, is about transforming the mundane into the holy.
Right.
The sources, like Beit Israel International and Gad Ephraim notes, they see the fallen sukkah of David as a symbol.
A symbol of what?
Of the current broken state, the exile, divine revelation here on earth. And its restoration, its rebuilding, doesn't just happen through sudden miracles alone. Crucially, it happens through Israel fulfilling its mission.
Which is it?
Engaging with the world, sanctifying it, and by doing that, drawing down and revealing divine light.
So our everyday actions, our mitzvot, trying to live a holy life within the natural world, that's literally helping rebuild this spiritual structure.
That's the perspective these teachings are putting forward. Mashiach ben David represents the ultimate revelation of God's kingship and unity, specifically here on earth.
Okay.
Our actions, our engagement with the physical world to elevate it, that's what prepares the ground, prepares the world for that ultimate revelation. Beit Israel International really emphasizes this active participation in sanctifying the world as a direct contribution to rebuilding that fallen sukkah bit by bit.
Okay, let's bring this back down to something maybe more internal, something these sources really focus on. The spies famously said, "We were in our own eyes as grasshoppers." That's such a powerful image.
It really is. And according to Beit Israel International and Gad Ephraim notes, drawing on commentators like Rashi and Talmudic wisdom, this wasn't just them saying, wow, those guys are tall.
Yeah.
It was a projection of their own internal state, how they saw themselves. This idea of seeing yourself as small, insignificant, incapable, that's presented as a huge spiritual stumbling block.
So wait, in this interpretation, the giants weren't even the main problem. Their own internal feeling of being like grasshoppers, that was the real obstacle.
Precisely. When we see ourselves as tiny, as fundamentally unable to fulfill our purpose, then even God's explicit promises, his backing, it all becomes invisible, or we just can't believe it.
Wow.
The sources really underscore this. The true challenge isn't the external giant, whatever form it takes. It's the internal perception that blinds us to our own inherent divine potential and the power that could be working through us.
I think in Kabbalah they talk about this, right? This internal smallness, katne harat, smallness of mind or self.
Yes, exactly. Katnut hadat. And it's linked to Hester Panim, the concealment of God's face.
Which isn't just God hiding.
No, it's described often as an exile of the mind, an internal state that stops us from seeing the divine light and power that's actually there, actually available. Teachings from the Zohar, from Beit Israel International, they push us to move beyond this crippling grasshopper view of ourselves.
Towards what?
Towards recognizing our actual divine connection and potential. As Gadi Farim highlights, the spies weren't just scared of the physical fight. They were maybe scared of the spiritual burden, the greatness of becoming God's active agents in transforming the world.
This story also connects, maybe surprisingly, to Tisha B'Av, doesn't it? The day we mourn the temple's destruction.
It does, yeah, a very powerful connection.
It seems counterintuitive. Sh'lach is about entering the land. Tisha B'Av is about exile from it.
Israel International teaches that the whole chain of destruction and exile we remember on Tisha B'Av, it actually has roots in a similar kind of spiritual failure. It echoes the spies' misstep. Well, the sources explain that when the spies came back with their negative report, the people wept that night. And Rashi famously notes they wept baselessly. For nothing, really.
Okay.
That moment of baseless despair, that spiritual self-rejection, that fear of the mission, it became, in this view, the seed. A seed that unfortunately grew into future calamities, including the temples being destroyed and the exiles that followed.
So the failure back in Sh'lach, specifically that internal collapse that we're just grasshoppers feeling, it kind of set a negative spiritual cycle in motion.
In a really profound way, yes, it represents a huge missed opportunity, and the consequences rippled through history. But Gadi Ephraim Notes also explains that even Tisha B'Av, even though it's a day of such deep mourning, it carries within it the seed of redemption.
How can that be?
Think about the 40 years in the wilderness that resulted from the spies' sin. It wasn't just punishment. Some sources describe it as a necessary spiritual gestation period.
Gestation, like development.
Exactly, preparing Israel for a different kind of entry into the land down the road.
How does wandering become preparation, not just penalty?
Well, sources like the Sifat Emet or the Tanya explore this. They explain that the wilderness, yeah, it seemed like aimless wandering and trials, but it also functioned like a hidden womb.
A womb.
Yeah. In that hidden place, emunah, pure faith, reliance on God learned through those direct miracles, it was gestated, nurtured. And that foundation of faith, built up in the wilderness, would eventually give birth to Bina, deep understanding.
What do you meaning?
Meaning the spiritual maturity Israel needed to finally enter the land, not just to conquer, but to properly sanctify it, to engage with the world and elevate it the way they were meant to.
So Tisha B'Av marks the destruction that came from the failure, but also, kind of paradoxically, signals the start of a redemptive process, gestating the qualities needed for a generation that could elevate the natural world and really prepare for Mashiach.
Exactly right. And that brings us right back around, full circle, to the vision of the fallen sukkah.
The fallen sukkah of David, the one that's destined to be restored.
Yes. As teachings drawing from the Zohar and Beit Israel International describe it, the sukkah, it's more than just a temporary hut here. It's a powerful symbol, like a spiritual miniature of the world's state and the coming redemption.
So it symbolizes restoring divine kingship, unity.
Yes, a state where eventually all nations will recognize and unite under the revelation of Mashiach ben David.
And our part in this, according to this perspective from Beit Israel International and Gadi Ephraim Notes, is to actively prepare the world, to rebuild this spiritual structure for that moment.
Precisely. Just as the spies failed to see their vital role in kicking off this transformation and redemption process, we are called to embrace our mission.
Which is?
To take the natural world, engage with it through divine purpose, through mitzvot, and turn it into a dwelling place for the divine presence. This active engagement, the sanctification of the natural, that's presented as the path.
The path to redeeming Israel, restoring the sukkah, and the ultimate revelation of Mashiach ben David.
That's the vision laid out.
Okay, so let's try and bring all these threads together then. The sources we've looked at, they present the spies' failure not just as, simple physical cowardice.
Right, but as a really deep theological misunderstanding. A failure to grasp that the ultimate divine plan unfolds not by, escaping the world or just sitting back waiting for miracles.
But through active, purposeful engagement with creation itself.
Exactly.
These teachings, especially from Beit Israel International, building on insights maybe found in places like Gadi Ephraim Notes, they really invite us to see our core purpose as sanctifying the natural world through what we do.
Yeah, transforming it into a vessel, a dwelling place for God's presence.
And that's the path they outlined for redemption, for rebuilding that fallen sukkah of David, and for ushering in the era of Mashiach ben David.
That's the connection they make.
So, thinking about this deep dive, this central lesson from Sh'lach, seen through this particular lens, seems pretty clear. We have to see ourselves not mainly as grasshoppers, right? Small and incapable when faced with external challenges.
But maybe more as essential partners. Partners in this ongoing work of creation and rectification, uniquely positioned to draw divine light into the very fabric of the world around us. Through our own dedicated efforts. That's the mission these sources are describing.
So what does all this mean for you listening? These sources, they connect this ancient story of the spies, the fundamental mission to make the natural world holy, that internal challenge of seeing ourselves as grasshoppers, the historical echoes in Tisha B'Av, and the ultimate vision of the restored Sukkah of David and the coming of Mashiach ben David.
They really all converge on this powerful idea, don't they? That the divine plan unfolds not by hiding from the world or just relying only on external help, but through our active engagement, our transformation of the physical, our willingness to take responsibility for elevating creation.
Yeah, the core message seems to be about fulfilling that grand plan by turning the natural into the divine, addressing the brokenness, bringing light into the world through our daily lives, our actions.
So here's a thought maybe to consider. What if the biggest obstacles we face, in fulfilling our potential, in contributing to a better world, what if they aren't really the external giants or challenges?
What that?
What if they're actually our own internal perception, that nagging feeling of being a grasshopper?
So how might seeing yourself differently change things? Not as insignificant or overwhelmed, but as a potential, maybe even vital partner in this incredible process of creation and redemption. Think about how shifting that self-perception could empower you, maybe, to bring more light, more holiness into the world around you, right where you are, in the natural, even mundane parts of your life.